This morning, an update on the city's public housing crisis. A judge orders priority action to eliminate mold as efforts continue to make sure there's adequate heat and hot water for the cold winter ahead. Plus,
I had done a lot of walking around New York before.
A man on a mission to walk 8,000 miles through every city street in all 5 boroughs. It took 6 years to complete. He'll tell us why he did it and what he learned.
Now, from 42nd and 2nd, this is Pix 11 News Close-Up with Marvin Scott.
Good morning, everyone. Now, despite efforts to rectify deplorable conditions in the city's 320 housing developments, many residents are still confronted with a myriad of problems, from lead paint to mold. The crisis, it continues to mount. This past Thursday, a federal judge turned down a plan to appoint a federal monitor to oversee the housing authority's compliance with health and safety rules. Instead, he gave thumbs up to a much narrower plan that focuses on the persistent issue of toxic mold. With a cold winter forecast, there's still no resolution of the heating problems or the lead problem that has sickened scores of children. This morning, I'm pleased to be joined by my colleague, Monica Morales, who has become a strong advocate for NYCHA residents, and her segment, Monica Makes It Happen, has helped many cut through the bureaucratic red tape. Also pleased to have with us Councilman Ritchie Torres. He is chair of the Committee on Oversight and Investigation. Good to have you with us. I want to know, were you surprised by the judge's ruling where he seemed to focus simply on the toxic mold problem and so many other things out there?
No, because the original consent decree, the agreement between the U.S. Attorney and the mayor, that would have focused on all the safety issues. The judge found that that was too vague to be enforceable, and it seems like the judge wants to move the housing authority in the direction of receivership, and under receivership, the city would lose control of public housing, and you would effectively have an emergency manager who would have the authority to eliminate labor contracts, to ignore state and local rules, and fundamentally restructure the agency from within. So the judge seems to think that the agency is so broken that only a receivership can fix it.
And you know, I have to say, Marvin, let's get real. There's so much wrong with NYCHA. So you're right. There's so much that needs to be fixed. So why just mold? Mold is such a big issue. Every time we go into a home, they have mold in their bathroom, and it affects their entire home. You smell it, you have asthma, your kids have asthma. So it's a very big deal. A lot of homes and a lot of families are going to hopefully see some answers because of this with this mold task force of sorts. So
I want to break away for a moment because you did a report this week that really gets to the heart of the problem. You spoke to a family in the Wagner houses in Harlem. Yeah. Let's take a look at that piece and we'll come back and talk more.
do you believe in true love? Well, wait till you meet the Casanovas here in Harlem. Their story is going to melt your heart, but they need our help. We're making it happen.
Because my mother is sick and she really doesn't need to be going through this hassle.
Leslie Casanova from Harlem says when she visits her parents, Luis and Margarita Casanova, it breaks her heart to see her mom, Margarita, battling leukemia. Her dad, Luis, never leaves his wife's side. But it's also a struggle to get repairs. Nice to meet you.
This is Margarita.
I've heard all about you. Wow, you can smell the mold as soon as you walk in.
Yes, absolutely.
We visited the Casanovas today. Walking into their apartment is like stepping back into time. Their walls are covered in family pictures, and they've been married 59 years. They're still very much in love. You still love her like you loved her the first day?
Same thing.
Same thing.
Oh my
Same thing.
Margarita's undergoing chemotherapy right now for her condition. She showed us the doctor's notes requesting the city to fix her bathroom.
With chronic medical condition, including chronic myelotic leukemia, which makes her immune compromised.
So did the doctor's note work?
No, it did not.
How bad is her bathroom? Look at this.
You can go in the bathtub and you look up, you can see that the whole wall is falling apart.
Yeah, under the
Look at that. Look at that.
Like where the shower is at.
Unbelievable. We can see right through a wall and smell the mold. So you cover your nose?
Yes, I cover my nose. I'm a sick person.
A red towel covers the exposed pipe.
City, let me tell you, they don't do nothing for us.
And we have good news. NYCHA says they are tracking the source of the leak right now. We'll send plasters and painters
real soon. You know, we'll be back Friday to check on things.
And if you have a story, reach out to us on Facebook at Monica Morales TV. That's Monica Morales TV. We could be in your neighborhood next. In Harlem with the Casanovas, Monica Morales, Pix 11 News.
Thank you, Monica. Take care.
Thank you very much. We appreciate
Thank you, Monica. I mean, that was done on Tuesday. We're now taping this on Friday. They've been efforting to get some help since July.
Right.
You walked in Tuesday. 3 days later, as we're taping this program, I understand there are construction crews in the apartment.
That's right.
You cut through the bureaucratic red tape.
Well,
why does it take public exposure of this to get them to finally act? Councilman?
Because the system is broken and only public shaming seems to work. But I'm skeptical that the judge's ruling is ultimately going to make a difference, because in the end, the root cause of mold and mildew in apartments is water penetration. And if you do not replace the bricks and do not replace the roofs, then tenants are going to continue to have a never-ending cycle of leaks and mold in their apartment.
Hallelujah,
so we're
what you
treating the
just said.
symptoms rather than the disease.
Hallelujah, because you know that is so true. The infrastructure is falling apart, and this is like he's just saying we're treating the symptoms, because you know I'll be back months later when it comes back again, and we need to treat the root cause, and that is these buildings are falling apart, and the money hasn't been put in there for how many decades, and it's time for a major change.
Well, you need $32 billion to complete, and there's none of that money there. The city's not coming up with it. The feds aren't coming up with it.
But it's even worse than that. I asked NYCHA, suppose I were to hand you a $32 billion check
tomorrow. I love that moment.
How long would it take you to make repairs? And NYCHA says, we don't know.
They can't answer that question.
So even when NYCHA has the resources, the management is too dysfunctional to actually make repairs.
That was a moment in the city council hearing when he said that, because we all thought money would be the answer. It's not. The management. Money and management. We need both. Mismanagement.
Why did the judge reject the monitor to oversee the entire problem?
Because I think the judge came to conclude that the monitor would be too powerless to shape the day-to-day operations of public housing, that NYCHA would continue to be in charge. And NYCHA is a broken bureaucracy. You know, I believe that the best proposal for improving public housing is to privatize the operation of public housing through a program known as the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program. I no longer have confidence that NYCHA can manage public housing effectively.
Now, there's been talk of privatization. Is that the answer?
You know, it's
Can private companies come in and do what others have failed to do?
Such a controversial topic. When you talk to residents, they don't trust NYCHA. They don't trust private landlords either. So they're stuck. They really feel stuck. So what is the answer? We need an answer right away. And Rich, you know everything about privatization. Well, they're calling it public-private partnership. Because the mayor gets very upset when I say it's privatization. It is public-private partnership. But I think a lot of people are afraid of it. They're really afraid of private entities coming in and taking over. But what is the option? Like, what do we have? You've said that. I've asked you about it. You said, what is our option if we don't do that?
Although we've had some experience with a RAD or a privatization, and it has been a success story. And we had an Ocean Bay development in Far Rockaway, Queens. Before the public-private partnership, you had a housing development that had been starved of resources for 60 years. After RAD, it received $560 million in renovation. So finally, residents are living in apartments free of mold and mildew, leaks and lead, with reliable heat and hot water.
Now, this week, the mayor said he was going to convert 62,000 apartments to Section 8 housing, which would permit privatization, private companies to come in and take care of the maintenance. Is that a step in the right direction?
It is, because under the program, you as a tenant would continue to live in the same apartment. You would continue to pay the same rent that you do now, no more than 30% of your income. The only difference is that you're going to see a transformation in your living conditions and more funding for repairs.
We got to take a break. Come back, continue. I want to talk about lead problem. We have a severe winter coming up. What about heat and hot water? We'll talk about that and much more about the NYCHA crisis when Pix 11 News Close-Up continues. Stay with us. Back now with the City Councilman Ritchie Torres and my colleague Monica Morales talking about the crisis in NYCHA housing. We were talking about the problem with mold. I forgot for a moment. From mold to lead. Where do we stand in the remediation of that problem? Over 1,000 children have been sickened by lead.
So for the first time in decades, NYCHA is beginning to build a lead safety program. The Housing Authority is in the process of testing over 130,000 units for lead. But there's no evidence that before this year, NYCHA ever had a functioning lead safety program. We know that for years, NYCHA was not only failing to conduct lead safety inspections required by local and federal law, but was submitting false information to the federal government.
Isn't that incredible? I mean, that's explosive information from the council.
We've been
member.
hearing so much. We had the former head of NYCHA was lying about the lead inspections, that they weren't being conducted. And now we hear our Department of Investigation Commissioner, Mark Peters, has been fired. He obviously was onto something.
Look, were it not for Commissioner Peters, we would have never known about NYCHA's lies about lead in public housing. So I find it telling that the mayor fired the very person who was at the forefront of exposing the corruption and the deception at the heart of NYCHA's lead program.
Now we have the council member and your investigation team for the city council. They're the only ones left, really. And I have to say, I asked the mayor that in the press conference. I said, did you call Mr. Peters? Because allegedly there was yelling. There was yelling going on in that phone call. And he said, I never did. I never yelled at him. So he denies any of it. So it's really a he said kind of situation. But now, what has happened with that investigation is what we want to know, what families want to know.
Now, you'll have, in addition to that, you have the U.S. attorneys continuing an investigation. What's going to come out of that?
Well, even with the firing of Commissioner Peters, there's likely to be an ongoing criminal investigation into NYCHA's lead safety program, because not only does DOI have a role, but the U.S. Attorney has a role. And I predict that that investigation will likely result in some degree of criminal prosecution.
Did you hear that? I mean, everybody wants to hear that. I mean, if you're living in public housing, what he just said was very key, because we've seen these elevators. Remember the elevator investigation?
We just had three elevator employees just arrested this week. Now, what's the mayor's culpability here? He says this all goes back to his predecessor, Mayor Bloomberg.
Look, it's true that the problems pre-exist the de Blasio administration, but rather than become part of the solution, the de Blasio administration became part of the problem and actively misled the city council and the public about the true scale of lead poisoning in public housing.
And there's a lack of trust, Marvin. A lot of residents that you talk to, I mean, in their homes every day, they don't trust this administration. And when you lose their trust, you lose everything. So hopefully they can build that back. But I think heads need to roll. I've said that to him personally at press conferences, and he has said, you know, we are accountable for our actions. We have a new team in place, you know, new general manager, a new interim chair that's doing the job, but we haven't seen a lot of action.
Now, let me ask this question, because I know a lot of people living in NYCHA who are watching this program want to know, are we going to have a repeat of last winter? What about heat and hot water? 25,000 apartments were without heat just over Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And I think their response was, well, it's a lot better than last year. We had 100,000. What's going to happen this winter? What's your forecast?
We're already seeing people who are cold, and we're not even in the height of the winter yet. And we're taking these calls, we're taking these emails, they're sending us videos, and it's very real. And we're in the Bronx almost every day. The Bronx is really hurting. Brooklyn's really hurting. Staten Island, we need to go to Staten Island more, because
the mayor pledged that he would have boilers repaired.
He did. He said it'd be better.
$multi-million over the summer.
Yes.
Has that been done?
Look, I think the story of the de Blasio administration is a story of broken promises. We're likely to see a citywide collapse of heating systems like we did last year, because the problems persist in NYCHA. There are too few boiler mechanics, and those boiler mechanics are too poorly trained and too poorly compensated to take care of our heating systems, which keep breaking down.
But they are spending $1 million a month with outside contractors trying to watch these boilers. And at the Wagner houses, allegedly, they're one of those developments that have received these outside vendors. But they're still struggling. So what does that say about these outside vendors? I don't know.
Now, isn't there a December 14th deadline for all parties to come together with a plan finally to get this problem fixed?
So the judge, as you pointed out earlier, rejected the plan agreed upon between the U.S. Attorney and the city. So the city and the U.S. Attorney have to go back to the drawing board and come to the judge with a new plan on December 14th. I'm not optimistic that the city's going to come back with a plan that the judge will accept.
Well, we're going to have an update, of course. We're marking our calendars. We're going to have full coverage on what happens on that day.
Councilman Ritchie Torres and Monica Morales, keep looking for your reports. Monica makes it happen, and you're out there. And
thanks, Marvin.
Congratulations on fantastic reporting.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us.
Of course, absolutely.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll meet a man who walked 8,000 miles through every single block in New York. You'll hear his story.
Such a good story.
Back in 2012, Matt Green decided to walk every block of every street in the city's 5 boroughs, living on $15 a day budget. He originally believed that the journey would take about 2.5 years, but in the end, it took closer to 6 years. Now his adventure has been chronicled in a 95-minute documentary McGee Hickey tells us more.
Meet Matt Green, an urban nomad who vowed to walk every single block of New York City, 8,000 miles. It took him 6 years.
You can just look around and learn stuff about every part of the world around you.
For me, there's a big difference between reading about a place in a book and being there in person.
A little more than 2 years into his journey, filmmaker Jeremy Workman began tagging along, trying to document all that Green encountered. Then Garnett Cadigan joined in the walk.
The kindness of strangers, that New York is a remarkably kind and open and friendly place. The readiness people have to tell their stories and to hear other stories.
Actor Jesse Eisenberg heard about the project and thought, why not be executive producer?
I mean, the real creativity in this movie is not just the movie itself, but the subject. The guy is walking every street, every path with no kind of articulatable goal, just the kind of goal of exploring, meeting people, and seeing the city.
At sold-out shows at the Quad, audiences got to join in a Q&A.
I like the concept of somebody doing this to begin with, and two, I really thought the editing is what made it work.
It's the little kid in all of us, only he gets to continue doing it as a grown-up.
And our thanks to McGee Hickey for that report. You know, The World Before Your Feet is currently playing at the Quad Cinema on 13th Street in Lower Manhattan. And Matt Green, he's with me now. You figured your journey totaled 8,000 miles. What motivated you to do this?
I don't know, really. I was working as an engineer for a number of years, and I was just sitting at my desk and sitting at the computer every day.
Bored?
Bored, yeah. It just wasn't quite. It wasn't a bad job. It wasn't the life for me. And I'd started doing a lot of walks around the city, just to explore it. And in 2010, I quit my job and I did a walk across America. That was
8,000 miles?
Yeah, in New York. Actually, I'm about 95% done with the walk, and I've walked over 9,000 miles now. When the movie was finished, it was at 8,000, and I thought there were maybe 500 left, and here I am at 9,000.
So you're still going?
Still going. Not probably 95%.
So share with us in the brief amount of time we have. What did you experience? What did you learn during that walk?
I think the biggest thing is just you learn not to accept stereotypes or easy narratives about places, because when you don't go somewhere, when you don't meet a certain type of person, it's easy to say, oh, they're all like this. But when you go out in the street, you go out through the neighborhoods, you meet all these different people, and you realize, of course, everybody's an individual, everyone has their own stories, and we can't really be summed up by what we look like, where we live, what we do for work, those kind of things. And also I learned that, when I first came to New York's such a city where you could look at the best of lists, and you gotta see this, you gotta see this, you gotta see this while you're here. And you think that that's what you have to do to make good use of your time, and then you realize everything in New York is fascinating.
How did you do it? How did you work out on a daily basis? Walking, how many hours a day do you walk?
It depends on the day. There's more daylight in the summer. Sometimes I'll walk 14 hours, sometimes 8 hours, sometimes 5 hours. And this, the speed I walk depends on the neighborhood a lot too. It depends on the weather, all kinds of things. So
you walk through all sorts of weather.
All sorts of weather, yeah. Because it's cool to see the city and all the different types of weather that happen here, all the different ways it can look.
What would you describe as the highlight of your odyssey?
It's impossible to pick. It would be like having 8,000 children having to pick your favorite one of them. It's impossible to pick one highlight, but it's just the idea of being everywhere. All these places you'd never get out to otherwise. And of course, people live there. People make livings there. People have their whole lives in all these places.
Now, you've been described as an urban nomad. You have no place to live.
You could either say no place to live or a lot of places to live. I couch surf with friends. I watch people's cats, watch people's plants when they're out of town. So I'm always bouncing around somewhere different in the city.
And you lived on a budget of $15 a day. That was kind of like a meager budget. How did you get by on that?
Yeah, well, so not having the rent helps a lot. And then I just eat very cheaply. I have rice and beans a lot. Keep all the costs as low as I can.
Now, I read somewhere that your journey was somewhat of a you became a micro historian of the city. Share with us some of these historic features that you saw.
Well, I've never read a history book about New York. I've never read kind of a top-down explanation of how the city came to be. I've just walked around and I see things and I take photos of them and I start to research them. And over time, they start to build this other little picture of the city. And it's not just history, it could be infrastructure, the way that things work in the city, the standpipes, for example, those little connections you see coming out of buildings that firefighters will pump water through to put out a fire. But then you start noticing all these other things about them. They're these whole series of spikes, these spike devices, handmade things that people put on to keep people from sitting on them and smoking a cigarette. So it's all these things. It's not what you'd read in a history book, but just little nooks and crannies, and you start paying attention to things, and you kind of learn about whole little universes in the city that you.
Like I've often observed of the artwork that exists in the city. If you look up,
yeah,
you look at
absolutely.
the gargoyles, and you look at the different things on top of some of these skyscrapers. So you observe that during your walk.
Yeah, and that was a great example because when I was working as an engineer, I'd always be walking up from Union Square to get off the train up to 26th Street where my office was, and it was probably 2 years in I finally looked up. And I saw all these buildings I've been walking by every day, this whole other world that I'd never even noticed before. So it let me know how much is out there.
I noticed a lot of it when I was in a helicopter and looking down and said, my gosh, look at this. This is a museum in itself.
It is. It absolutely is.
The city of New York is a museum when you look down at all the artwork up there.
Right, so all you have to do is go be out in it.
So share me with us some of the people you met and how they reacted to you when you told them you were walking 8,000 miles.
I mean, a lot of people, it's hard to even explain what I'm doing, It takes so many words to explain it. A lot of people don't even know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I mean, some people think it's nuts. Some people think it's really cool. Some people probably had a hidden desire to not necessarily do exactly this, but when you look at a map of the city, like for me, when I first moved here, it was the subway map. Just seeing all these subway stations with certain names, I just wanted to know what those looked like on the ground. So I think some people have that curiosity about the city that they never really have a chance to explore.
Well, you're very curious. I understand before you embarked on this journey, you did a ride through every subway station through the city?
Yeah, back in 2006, a friend and I broke a record for riding through every subway station the fastest time. It took us 24 hours and 2 minutes.
24 hours? Yeah. We should try that during rush hour.
Yeah,
right?
I think our record might be safe now because things are going a little slower in the subway these days.
Okay, so Matt, you've conquered the subways, you've conquered the streets. What's your next mission?
I don't know. I have no idea. I still got some months of walking to finish this. Still got probably 500 miles left. So I'm still waiting to see what's next. So
let's talk about this. How did you find every street, every borough? That's curious.
Sure. So, I have a digital map of the city, and I plot out my routes on top of that, and I have a progress map. You can see it on my website, imjustwalking.com. You can look at a progress map with every block I've walked traced in red. So it's really it's basically the digital version of taking a map and highlighting every street you walk.
Now, as we saw McGee Hickey's report, that one man she spoke to said, well, it's the kid in all of us.
Yeah. I think that's true.
You're a kid at heart, and you're curious, and you take on all these unusual missions.
Yeah, I think, I've done some talks at schools for younger kids, and I've done some walks with classes. And I've really noticed that, something happens when you get older and you start seeing a lot of the world as a waste of your time. You stop being curious about it. And I was reminded when I do stuff with second grade kids, fifth grade kids, they were so excited about everything. All of these little details of the standpipe spikes I was talking about that, probably half your viewers are like, what's this idiot talking about, standpipe spikes? But the kids are fascinated by this stuff.
If you looked at it all, what would you say was the thing you learned most about New York through your mission?
I think what I learned most is that everywhere you are, there's something to learn and to be fascinated by. And we're conditioned to think you have to go to these highlight places to not be bored. But in reality, if you just take the time to look around you, there's fascinating stuff everywhere.
Well, okay, your film, The World Before Your Feet, is currently playing at the Quad Cinema on 13th Street in Lower Manhattan.
Yeah, it's opening in Jersey, Connecticut, Hudson Valley.
I'll look for it.
Yeah.
Matt Green, thank you very much.
Great.
Catch you on your next walk.
Thank you, sir.
That'll do it for our program for this week. If you have any comments or wish to see this broadcast again, log on to our website at pix11.com/newscloseup. I'm Marvin Scott. Thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, everyone.